Believe it or not, the iPhone 7 is now 3 years old. Well, okay, technically 2.5, but the iPhone 10, I'm sorry, 7 came out in 2016, and it's kind of hard to believe how much time has passed since then and how different just the phones of today look compared to this. This was kind of, I would say, more or less the gold standard at that point, the 7 and 7 Plus, and everybody was copying the design of the 7 Plus, and it's just kind of funny to look back now at these phones, and especially in 2019, the question is, do they make sense? Is it still a smart buy? And another question that I knew that people are asking is it worth an upgrade? Like, is it, if you have an iPhone 7, should you get the new 10s, 10R, whatever it is? Do you need to change your phone? And I think that it was such an important question to answer. I couldn't just do it off the top of my head. I actually had to use the phone. So it was actually, I did this a little bit a while ago, and I just got around to filming it, but I used this as my main phone for 3 weeks. So 3 weeks, I even stopped using Android phones. I decided that this was the only phone I was going to use, be it for everything. Maps, calls, social media, everything, YouTube watching, I was going to do on this phone. And just see what it's like to use, comparing it to coming from a 10s Max. And coming from an iPhone 10s to the 10R to this was actually a pretty big jump in the matter of about a month and a half. So I was kind of looking forward to just seeing what this phone was about. And I wasn't, off the bat, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't excited about the battery life, because I remember even when I had the 7 Plus, when it was out, I got just subpar battery life. I don't want to say it was bad, but it was average. I had to charge it at least once throughout the day to get through the entire day, and it just didn't feel like it was an all-day phone, especially on a heavy use. So starting off, let's talk about the price of these phones. So right now, brand new, you can get the iPhone 7 for $449 and the iPhone 7 Plus for $569 from Apple. Now that's brand new. If you go the refurbished route, you could get a iPhone. There isn't a 32 gig available as far as I've checked on the 7, so you can only get 128 gig at $469, which might not make sense if you're trying to save on money. But if you do get the 7 Plus, you can get a certified refurbished directly from Apple for $479. That's with the same 1-year warranty you'd get if you get it brand new. You get all new accessories. You get it's a brand new phone in most regards. It's just it's a little bit cheaper there. So for people who are buying the 7, I'm pretty sure that budget is a big concern in their head. So I think that at $479, the iPhone 7 Plus is actually a very good value for what you get out of it. But the question being of value comes up to where it stands in terms of performance. Now, performance-wise, this is a very good phone. When it came out, it was on top, and even today, apps haven't changed that drastically where the performance feels laggish in any way. I used it for 3 weeks. I'm a pretty intense user. You know, I use a lot of different apps. I'm always switching through, and I couldn't find it didn't really stutter at all. The only place I saw any difference was RAM. I definitely noticed where it was dropping apps, where it was kind of closing apps to keep a few others open. So that was the only place I could notice a significant performance difference. I'm sure if I put them side by side, if I put a 10s side by side to the 7, you'll immediately start seeing differences. But when you're using it normally, just, everyday use, you don't feel it. And a big factor of that is because iOS 12 is just so optimized throughout the entire iPhone lineup that really you don't feel that big of a difference. Another amazing thing I noticed about this phone is the size. So when I came, the second I got the 10s Max, I immediately knew that phone was just way too big for me. When I moved to the 10R, it felt a little bit better, but it was still a pretty big phone. But coming back down to the iPhone 7 was just, I did miss the bigger screen, but I just loved having a phone that could fit perfectly in my hand, and I wouldn't have to worry about it. One-handed use is just pretty comfortable on this. I mean, it's not complete one-hand phone. There are certain parts of the screen you can't reach even with one hand, but it is way better than these Plus model phones and Max model phones that are just so ridiculous and they're so big that it was nice to go back to a smaller phone. And along with the older design, one of the best things I found was Touch ID and the home button. It's just when Apple moved to Face ID, I was very upset about it, but over time I got accustomed to it and I found it to be pretty good. But I still miss Touch ID. Only going back to it did I realize how much I missed it. Touch ID just made unlocking the phone so much easier. it just feels a lot better to me. The only one point you'd have to keep in mind is that if you wear gloves or something, you're not going to be able to unlock, and in certain situations, Face ID can be just as useless. So that's not a big factor, but I definitely liked that the home button was just a little bit easier to use, and I definitely liked that the reachability. So reachability is where you can, if you have a web page or anything open and you want to reach the top of the screen, on the iPhone 7, all you have to do is double tap the home button, and as you saw, the entire screen came down. Now on the iPhone 10, 10s, 10R, all these newer phones, since there's no home button, you have to swipe on the screen. And, while it works a lot of the time, it just doesn't feel as easy or as comfortable as this one. And there's a lot of false touches on that as well. So overall, I think that in terms of reachability, we've gone backwards with the 10s, 10, because of those gestures that we have to use instead of just physically tapping on this home button, which it just makes it so much easier. And further off, another big thing I liked about this phone is the square display. I wasn't sure how I'd feel about going back to a phone with big bezels. I've been using all these phones with, the increasing war on bezels just makes every phone all glass, all display. And I'm going to tell you, to be very honest, I actually don't mind this at all. The square display means it's a normal aspect ratio. Apps look a lot more uniform. Videos look so much better on this. I enjoyed watching videos on this more than I did on my 10s Max. So think about that. It's just, even though it has a really good screen, the 10s Max, I just can't help but feel sometimes, when I zoom in all the way, I'm losing out on coverage or something. And this, it fills up the entire screen. It just feels a lot nicer. And the video watching experience, for some reason, was just better on this. I don't know why. The display's not better, for sure. But the experience, it was. And similarly, just not having a notch was really, it was good because I want uniformity on my screen. That's why I really like the Galaxy S8 and S9 screen, because they were uniform. Now they've changed that as well and made it the S10 has that hole now, but it's a different story for another day. In the end, I really like this display because it was just so uniform and the experience of it was very good. Now moving on from that, I want to talk about battery life. Now the battery life on this phone has to be the biggest issue. So if you're somebody who's a power user, the iPhone 7, iPhone 8, definitely stay away from those. They have very bad battery life. 7 Plus and 8 Plus are going to do you a little bit better, but I would still really advise that if you are looking for the best battery life on an iPhone, you have to go for the iPhone 10R, maybe the 10s Max, but it's just, these batteries are not that good. As I said, as I was testing through, I would get about 3.5 to 4 hours of screen on time. And comparing that to my 10R, which got 8.5 hours consistently, was mind-blowing. So this is half the battery life of that phone, and that really changes the experience because I had to charge this phone up about 2 to 3 times a day. Most of the time it's just kind of in charge. So if I sit down at my desk, I plug it into charge. If I'm going in the car, I plug it into charge because I know it's going to run out eventually. So I just kind of keep having to top it off, whereas I did not have to do that with the 10R at all. And that kind of brings me on to the point of this not having a wireless charger. Because of the frequent need to charge the phone up, I kind of miss not having a wireless charger because a lot of times what I do is when I sit down at my desk, I'll just plop my iPhone 10 onto a wireless charger and it's charging, done deal, nothing to worry about. But with this, I had to go back to using cables. A lot of times I would just kind of forget. I'd put it onto the wireless charger and really not think about it. It was just a force of habit. And then realize, oh wait, this phone won't charge on that. And then I'd have to plug it in later. It was just kind of this thing where wireless chargers have become so good. And, they don't charge very fast, but they get the job done. And, you don't usually need a full, quick burst of charge. You're okay with it charging a little bit slower, but it just being more convenient. So moving on from that, I want to talk about the audio quality on the phone. So the earpiece quality has definitely improved on the newer phones, on the 8, the 10. So comparing it to that, it just feels, those phones feel way ahead of this. It just doesn't feel that good. The speaker audio output, so when you're listening to songs or something through the iPhone speakers, right next to my iPhone 10R, I kind of kept it. So if I kept my volume on the 10R just a little bit above half, that was what the full volume on the iPhone 7 was. So that's just to give you a more real-life perspective. It's kind of half of the volume of what the 10R will give you. So the speakers on the newer phones are definitely louder. So if you're somebody who likes to listen to a lot of audio through your phone, that might be something to consider if you're looking at buying an iPhone 7. And finally, let's talk about that camera. So the camera is one of the bigger things that you never really realize how good they're getting unless you go a step back. So I kind of gotten so used to the iPhone XS and XR's camera performance that when I went back to the 7, it was surprising. I mean, I'd always think that the iPhone 7's camera is pretty good. There's no problem with it, but it just doesn't do as much as the iPhone XS and XR's camera. You don't have portrait mode, you don't have the secondary telephoto lens, you don't have a lot of things that you have on the XS, XR, and it just kind of gets it. You feel it. And the biggest thing I have to say is that image quality is just not comparable at all. Apple uses that dynamic range to kind of piece together multiple pictures on these newer phones, and it absolutely changes the entire look of the photo. And going back to an older phone, I don't think would be, the smartest move. So if you're somebody who enjoys taking photos, a newer phone is definitely worth the money, in my opinion, just because of how good those new cameras are. And as I was talking about that, it just kind of brings up my experience with it, where the camera quality was actually not as up to my standard when I, compared to the iPhone 10 and XS Max, that I actually stopped using and uploading a lot of photos onto Instagram, on Instagram stories, because I just felt like the quality wasn't that good. And it really kind of goes to show how these newer cameras, you just feel more excited to take photos with them because the results are so good. And that's not really the case with this phone, but I get it. Not everybody takes a lot of photos, but the camera is still very decent. But when compared to some of the newer stuff, it's really far behind. And also, just a quick note, low light performance on the 7 and 7 Plus compared to the newer phones is just abysmal. Even the new phones aren't that good with low light, but it's just this one is pretty bad. A lot of noise, and just it's not as good. Now, moving on from the camera, I want to talk about something that I've gotten asked a lot, and that is, should I get the iPhone 7 or should I get the iPhone 8? And my reasoning here is that if you're looking at both of these phones right now in 2019, I'd go with the iPhone 8 because the iPhone 8 is 1 year newer. You're going to get a little bit longer software update. It has a slightly newer processor. So right now you're not noticing the difference, but as it ages, a year on, a year and a half on, the iPhone 7, you're going to start to notice it get sluggish, whereas the 8, you're going to have another year before it starts to feel that sluggishness. And that's a big advantage, especially when the price difference is only $100 or so between the two. So I would definitely say if you're looking between the 7 and the 8, it would be a smart choice to go up to the iPhone 8 if your budget allows for it. If it doesn't, I understand, not everybody can, but the iPhone 8 is definitely a worthwhile upgrade if you are wagering both of these phones. So that wraps it up with the iPhone 7, guys. And to just summarize, I think that the iPhone 7 is a great phone, and it's something that I would definitely recommend to people. However, just the thing is that the iPhone 8 is just, a little bit better there. So if someone could afford it, I would definitely tell them to go up to the 8. Both of them are good phones, but the 8 just makes a little bit more sense in 2019. And to people who are looking at the, to the people who have iPhone 7s right now, who are using this phone, the 7 and 7 Plus, I would definitely recommend going and getting an upgrade if you were thinking about it, because the camera and the battery life alone really make the entire experience worth it. And if you are somebody who is into displays and stuff, the newer AMOLED displays on these phones is amazing. And I just think that the entire experience is it's elevated, but it's not very different. iOS 12 is still iOS 12. All these phones still have the same functionality. They all work with the same accessories. It's not a very big difference. However, the small things do add up. And if you're somebody who likes taking photos and who needs battery power, it's a no-brainer in my opinion. So that wraps up for this one, guys. If you have any questions about the iPhone 7 that I did not address in this video, please feel free to ask me down in the comments below. And if you haven't already, I would really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. And also, check me out on Instagram and Twitter. I have all the links down in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll catch you in the next one.